Welcome back. Today is day 6 in our factoring unit. Today we'll be learning how to factor without algebra tiles. Building rectangles is fun, but we need a faster way to factor trinomials. Alright, let's get started. For today's do now, I need you to review what we learned about yesterday. Pause the video, and when you have completed the do now, resume the video and we will begin. In our previous lesson, we built rectangles using an app. The reason we built rectangles was to figure out how to factor trinomials. Recall that the factors of our trinomials was the length and the width of each of our rectangles. We also noticed that when the middle term of the trinomial was negative, then the rectangle needed to be built with red X tiles. Today we will begin to move away from tiles and just to be able to factor with algebra. So let's see if we can develop an algorithm or just a way to kind of do this by hand. Again, the algebra tiles are nice. They're pretty fun when we're first starting out, but eventually you're going to want to be able to do this by hand without the tiles. They're just there to help us out for the beginning. So let's try number 1. Number 1 says factor an x squared plus 7x plus 12. So that means I know we're going to be factoring this trinomial to be like, what two binomials multiply to give me that? The key to this will be looking at your first term and your last term. So when I look at the x squared, I got to think, what times what gives me x squared? Well, that's pretty easy, just x times x. And again, down here in the picture, you can see that x times x gives me x squared. Perfect. Now the next part, we need to think about the factors of 12. So what are the factors of 12? Well, let's do the same thing. So I usually write these ones down though. So 12, I know I can get 1 times 12, that would be a factor. 2 times 6 would work. And 3 times 4. Perfect. Now, those numbers are pretty interesting because look at what happens when you look at the bottom corners over here. Well, the first rectangle is 3 by 4. This rectangle is a 2 by 6, and this last rectangle is a 1 by 12. So again, those factors, that's why we use those to help us build those to see this, is that those factors are going to be that makes up that 12. Now, the next part. So once we have that, how do we know which one of these is my answer? So should I plug in the 2 and the 6? Should I plug in the... Well, if you look at this, what is 3 plus 4? Well, 3 plus 4 is 7. So I think that's my answer. Let me show you why. And they're both going to be positive because we try to make a positive 12. Why is my answer? Why is that one my answer? Let's check this out. So let's multiply this back out real quick. Well, x times x is going to be x squared. And then we're going to go with x times 4, which is 4x. And then 3 times x, which is 3x. And lastly, we'll get, I'm just using first, outer, inner, last. Last we'll multiply the 3 and the 4, which is just 12. So guess what? The 3x and the 4x adds up to the 12x. So this 7x is the little piece that we needed right there. The 7x right there. So that's kind of your hint. As you're doing these problems, you're looking at your factors and you're like, hey, do any of these make the 7x that we need? So let's try the next problem. Next problem will probably go a little bit faster. So let's factor this problem. So we have x squared plus 8x plus 12. Well, first of all, how do you make an x squared? Well, x squared will be x times x. How do we make a positive 12? Positive 12, we're just going to use the same little table that we have over here. So, well, we can do 1 times 12, 2 times 6, or 3 times 4. And I know I need to make an 8x when we multiply this out, so I'm going to use the 2 and the 6 for this problem. So 2 and 6, and they're both going to be positive. And they're both positive because we need to make a positive 12. And then when I check my work, I don't check everything. Because look at, I know if I multiply x times x, the red ones, I should get the x squared. I know if I multiply a positive 2 times a positive 6, I better get the 12. But only thing I'll check is to make sure that I get the 8x. So I'll just draw a little check here. So this is a 2x. This is a 6x. And what does that add up to? Positive 2x with the positive 6x is 8x. So that's how I check. When I do my checks, I just do a little, kind of looks like a little happy face. And I'll check it out real quick. And there we go. So that means my factors, this works. So the factors of this polynomial is going to be x plus 2 times x plus 6. And again, factoring was one of my favorite things when I was going to school. Because again, it was just patterns, some numbers, and I really liked them. Let's look at this one. Well, same thing. Start off, how do we make an x squared? Well, x times x. Perfect. How do we get 12? Well, 12, there's 3 ways. There's 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4. Which one's going to make 13? Well, that's obvious, the positive 1 and the positive 12. And just to check my work real quick, let me just make sure this one gives me a positive 1x, and this would give me a positive 12x, and that does add up to 13x. Perfect. So again, factoring to me was never that much trouble once I understood this little part right here. All right, we're going to try this again, but you're going to see it's going to be a little bit different in the next problems. All right, so again, this one, what's different between this problems and 1 through 3 and 4 through 6 are totally different. What's the difference? The big difference is that when you look on the bottom here, we have negative tiles in here, and that's because our B term right here, they're negative, so that means it's going to change our problem a little bit. So let's see if we can solve this problem and make it make sense. So again, we know we're factoring. We have some binomial we're trying to figure out. We do the same method. Let's figure out how do we make an x squared. X squared should be simple. X times x. Perfect. Now let's look at our last term here and a 6. How do you make a 6? What are your factors of 6? Well, 6 is going to be 1 times 6 and 2 times 3. And we are also trying to make a negative 7x when we're adding these up. So which one of those does it look like we should use? Well, negative 7, if I use these two, that'll add up to 7. So my answer is negative 1 and negative 6. Now, does that make sense? Well, it should make sense because what's negative times a negative? That's going to be a positive, so that does make sense. Negative 1 times negative 6 should make a positive 6. And let's check our work. Let's check to make sure that we got this correct. So again, we'll do my inner ones, which is negative 1x, and my outers, which would multiply together, give me negative 6x. And when you add those up, you get negative 7x. So perfect. The factors for this problem is x subtract 1 and x subtract 6. Not too bad. These are my favorite problems. I love factoring. All right, let's try the next one. All right, same method. How do you get x squared? Simple. Game over. X times x. All right, next. How do we get a positive 6? Positive 6, we can write it down again so we can see it. 1 times 6 and 2 times 3. But this time we're trying to make a negative 5. Well, this looks like it'll work for me. So if I have a negative 2 and a negative 3, and they both have to be negative. Why do they both have to be negative? Because when you multiply them together, we better get a positive 6. If I chose one to be negative and the other one to be positive, then that would give you a negative number, so that wouldn't work. And again, I'll just check my work. When you guys are doing this, I want to see you guys checking your work. I just want to see this little check right here. Check, check. Negative 3x. And that does make a negative 5. Perfect. So I factored this one. Pretty soon you'll do a lot of these with just mental math, just by looking at them really quickly. All right, last one. X squared. X times x. 12. What are my factors of 12? Let me write those down real quick. 12. Factors of 12. 1 times 12. 2 times 6. 3 times 4. Okay. And I'm trying to make the sum needs to be negative 13x. It looks like I should use the 1 and the 12. Yeah, that makes sense. Negative 1 and negative 12. So let's check that real quick. So this one will be negative 1x, and this one will be negative 12x. And that's perfect. That'll add up to negative 13. Done. So my problems for this one is going to be x minus 1, x minus 2. We have 6 problems for you to try. Pause the video, and when you're done, or if you get stuck, resume the video to review the answers. So we are going to call the method that we just learned to factor trinomials the guess and check method. Write a 25-word summary of the guess and check method and then begin your classwork. Remember, the answers to the classwork will be in another video. Thanks again for watching this video. Bye-bye.